So for the new office, I ordered 13 of these lateral filing cabinets. I get a phone call that says, they're here. So I rush back to the office so I can sign for them. And when I get out of the car, I see two pallets full of these cabinets sitting in front of our office and blocking the front door. So I get out of my car and I approach the truck driver. He comes up to me, he cuts me off. He says, here's the paperwork. Sign this, I have to go. I said, wait, I've got to get these heavy cabinets into the building. Are you going to help me? No, that's not my problem. Sign this paperwork, I have to go. At that point, all I see is red. I've got this jerk of a truck driver who left these cabinets blocking the entrance to my building, and now he wants to leave. An argument ensues. I use language I shouldn't have used, and lo and behold, I end up carrying the cabinets into the building myself. He thinks I'm a jerk, I think he's a jerk. How many times do we allow ourselves to be drugged into arguments and come away thinking the other person was a jerk while that person thinks we're a jerk? I can tell you from my standpoint, it's more times than I can count. I've got email chains that go as long as my arm, arguing who's right and who's wrong. I've known siblings that don't talk to each other for years. And I've even known parents and children who stop talking to each other over arguments that to the rest of us would seem silly. If you're like me, following the outcome, when you're retelling the story or when I'm retelling the story to somebody else, I'm always recruiting them to believe that I was the one that was in the right and the other person was the one that was really the jerk. And finally, I got sick of this happening because, quite frankly, it was distracting me from being happy. And it was distracting me from making things better. I went about the task of figuring out why this happens and why it's so hard to get arguments to end. And I found a book written actually by Urban Meyer, the college football coach. And it's called Above the Line. And it was a great read. I'll link it below. Coach Meyer realizes that teaching football is the same as teaching life. And he teaches his coaches and he teaches his players to respond to unforeseen, unexpected events so that their training will kick in. And when it comes to football, they'll be able to give 4 to 6 seconds of relentless effort on every play with focus and attention to detail without being distracted by any of the outside emotions. E plus R equals O. So event plus response equals outcome. An event is something that happens to us. It's the truck driver pulling up for me. The response is my response to that event. The outcome, in my case, was the anger. But what happens then is that creates another event for the other person. So my outcome creates an event for the truck driver. And then he has a choice on what his response is going to be. And then that will create another event for me. And it goes in a circle until there's a collective response. Let me tell you, I'm a lawyer and I've been conditioned to believe that I'm right. So the realization that my actions, my responses contribute to the outcome of what happens, especially the bad outcomes, knocked me right on my butt. I've been deposing doctors for 25 years. I've had them in the hot seat. They're some of the most educated people in our society, but they have no idea that their responses to the events of being sued have a direct impact on the outcome of the case. I've met all of the stereotypes. The God complex.
You ask me if I have a God complex? Let me tell you something. I I am God.
The greed-driven.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
The uncaring.
Well, just snake a tube down her nose and I'll be there in 4 or 5 hours.
And the prideful.
Thoracic burst fracture.
Yeah, well, I could help, but so could 50 other people. Find me something worth my time.
Most of the doctors that hurt or kill someone are incapable of relating to the plight of the patient. They're so caught up in themselves, they're unable to see that their arrogance affects the outcome of the case against them. Professionals have difficulty controlling their response to events. Yet, a college football coach has been able to teach it to 18-year-old student athletes. The book goes into a long discussion about how to make your response go above the line, as Coach Meyer calls it. I recommend the read. For me, knowing that I could control my response to the events was different than knowing why I get angry or mad or sad when events occur. It's easy to conceptualize going above the line, as Coach Meyer calls it. But once I get mad, once I get angry, it's really hard to pull myself out of that. It's really difficult to pull yourself out of a tailspin. So I needed to understand more. I needed to understand why. So to learn how, I had to do more digging. And what I came to learn is that there are really only 5 emotions. There's happy, sad, anger, fear, and shame. And of those 5, 4 of them stuck. And those 4 are always pulling and always competing for my attention in how I respond to events. And they're in direct conflict with me being happy. In a book called Crucial Conversations, what I learned is in between the event and the time that we respond, we actually tell ourselves a story about what we just saw, the event that just occurred. And it's that story that determines how we feel. And it's how we feel that determines how we respond. So what I learned for myself is that in between the E and the R that Coach Myers talks about, there's another equation that's going on. And that equation is S plus F equals R. It's the story that we tell ourselves, and the feelings that come from that story will equal the reaction that we have going back into the equation and therefore affecting the outcome. At the core of every event in my life, I realize that there are 4 negative emotions that are pulling at me to try and get me to tell their story in terms of how I respond to events. And when I give into those negative emotions, I get into arguments that go on and on and on and on. So if I want to change how I respond to events, then I've got to change the story that I tell myself about what just happened. So did you ever buy a new car and then all of a sudden you see the same car on the roadway with you? Those cars were with you the whole time, but you never realized that they were there because you didn't own the same car. The same thing happens with these emotions. Because I'm paying attention to the emotions that are pulling at me, I find myself being able to see those emotions that are pulling at other people when they're responding to things that I put out there. There's a scene in the movie from Wonder Woman that explains it all.
Not everyone gets to be what they want to be all the time. Me, I am an actor. I love acting. I didn't want to be a soldier, but I'm the wrong color. Everyone is fighting their own battles, Diana. Just as you are fighting yours.
Everyone I meet is fighting their own battle, just like I'm fighting mine. And being in touch with that lets me be in tune with the story that I tell myself when events happen, how I feel, and how I respond to the events that occur to me. When I saw the pallets outside the office, I needed to tell myself the truck driver's story. He was alone. He had to deliver 2 pallets of heavy filing cabinets. And he wasn't told that he had to bring those cabinets into the office. So he was doing his job as far as he knew. And by telling myself the truck driver's story, that would have allowed me to change how I responded to the situation. Now, that may or may not have led to the truck driver helping me to bring the cabinets into the office, but what it certainly would have done was let the total outcome of the events end in a way that he didn't think that I was a jerk and that I didn't think that he was a jerk. So instead, my anger was feeding his anger, was feeding my anger, and those things were going in a vicious circle to the point where the outcome, the ultimate outcome of the events, had no other choice than to be controlled by the anger that we both felt in the events. By actively thinking about the story that I'm telling myself, I get to spend more time with my friend Happy and his children, calm, rational, content, mindful, grateful, pleased, and understanding. All of those are better ways to respond to the events that occur. My email chains have gotten shorter, I have less heated arguments, and my blood pressure is down. It doesn't, I want to tell you another secret. It really doesn't matter if the story that I tell myself about the other person is true or not true. The point is to change how I feel, to change the story I'm telling myself. And by me feeling better, the outcome of the events for me is better, even if the other person can't get out of their own way. So I hope that in time, I won't have to consciously think about the story that I tell myself, but instead, I will automatically push aside fear and shame and sadness and anger, and I'll be able to take myself above the line in terms of my responses automatically. But until that time, I'm going to have to keep thinking about and changing the story that I tell myself when events happen. So I invite you to start thinking about the story that you're telling yourself when events occur. If anger, sadness, shame, fear are pulling at you and they're trying to control the narrative of how you feel, change the story and see if you can move toward happy or happy-ish, if that's all you can get to. Sometimes calm is all you can get to. But when you do that, see if the outcome of the events changes from your perspective and if the overall outcome changes. I'll bet it will. I'm making these videos to share my journey, to share how in my experience our why shapes everything in our lives, whether we want it to or not. My hope is that the people watching get something that they can use in their life on their journey. I'll be putting these videos out on a regular basis, and you can find them here on this channel, or you can find a link to them on our website at caseyinjury.com. Thanks for watching, and be well.